Hello, everyone. We are so excited to be gathered here for International Women's Day, and we're really grateful to the entire Fyli team for inviting this conversation and this panel about investing in the next generation of women in impact. My name is Chelsea Toler. I'm a founding principal of Nova Impact, and our community is focused on next-gen philanthropists and impact investors and doing good in the world together. I first want to just introduce my co-founder, Olivia, as well, and for her to share a little bit more about Nova, and then we'll dive in with some questions with our amazing speakers tonight.
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia Dell. I'm really excited to be here. Happy International Women's Day. We're really excited as Nova Impact to be here with all these incredible women and leaders in the impact space. We at Nova are really passionate about creating really tangible pathways to engagement in the impact space for people of all ages, all different backgrounds. And so we think one of the key tenets of getting involved and engaged in the impact space is understanding what leaders in the space are already doing and figuring out how you're uniquely positioned to support them. So we're so excited to have all these incredible leaders with us today and can't wait to hear what they're up to.
Yeah, so the way that we're going to do this is Olivia is going to kick us off with the first question, but we thought it would be fun, since this is a panel about investing in the next generation of women, for each person, before they speak or answer the question, I'm going to share a little bit about how they have invested in us or invested in this community. So with that, Olivia, will you tell us the first question, and then I'll intro us into a few speakers?
Yes, absolutely. So our first question is, who are you, what brought you here, and what are you passionate about? We really want this to be a great way for you to introduce yourself, tell us what you're working on, and just give a little bit of context into the work and passions that you have.
So the first speaker that I would like to call on, and am humbled to have with us, is Fayruz. She is such a powerhouse in the philanthropy sector and really thinks innovatively about philanthropy as a whole and what we can do in the community. For me, she advocated to have me join the Connect Her board, which is an incredible nonprofit of women that are focused on film and investing in women and girls. So with that, I'd love to start with Fayruz.
Happy International Women's Day, everyone. Thank you, Chelsea, for that beautiful introduction. My name is Fayruz Benyousef, and I am just so excited about this day and this time that we're in. I would say that we have a long way to go, but we sure have come a long way. And for me personally, I'm a philanthropy strategist and advisor, and being able to do what I love every day and being able to work in an area where there are a lot of women of all ages, very diverse in terms of their backgrounds, their interests, their passions. That speaks so much to me, because while I have a background and a career doing this now close to 3 decades, I learn every day, and I'm inspired every day by especially women who are from different sort of backgrounds and outlooks, and especially the younger generation, the next gen, if you will. I remember being that next gen, and I remember thinking, hey, will somebody listen? I have ideas. I really think I can contribute. And there were a few, not many, women especially, who took me under their wing, and I will forever be grateful for their mentorship. And so one of the spaces that I'm truly passionate about at the stage of life and career where I am is doing that for others. And so I'm humbled and I'm excited to be a part of this group this evening.
Thank you so much, Fayruz. So the next speaker I would like to turn to is Sophia. Sophia joins us, I believe, all the way from Australia. Sophia invested in NextGen and in me personally when we had some folks that had an idea, as she serves as the interim director for the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network for Youth. I try and get that right every time, about doing things a little bit differently. And even though, you know, she runs this nonprofit organization with a lot of initiatives, she took a chance on operating a grant that's going to better support the community and advocating for that with the funders, and was successful in that endeavor. And I think that's going to do so much for the next gens in their community as well. So with that, Sophia, you want to share a little bit about yourself and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the introduction. Happy International Women's Day to everyone. I can definitely resonate with the sentiment around like other women, female mentors believing in you and the power of that, right? And so for me, so I, as Chelsea mentioned, I work at the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. I lead our youth program specifically around, how can we educate young people around the world and help them find a way to meaningfully contribute to sustainable development. And that's like the one thing that I'm really passionate about. How do we educate people and empower young people to make those contributions? Because ultimately young people are the ones who are going to inherit this world. And currently there's a lot of improvement to make. And the only way we can really do that is involve the voices of diverse groups of people. And that includes, people of different ages, so young people, the people that we focus on, but also people from different backgrounds. So, not just taking the opinions and the perceptions of, say, like maybe countries who have done really well in the sustainable development space, but also those from developing countries and those who don't always get a voice at the table. Intersectionality is really important, especially as someone who also is an Asian female living in Australia, which is multicultural, but obviously has, people from different backgrounds and being able to give people a space to put their voice on the table as well. So that's just a little bit about me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. So next, we're going to turn it over to my first boss in the impact space, who took a chance on me when I was in grad school, and since then have seen her serve as the chair and do quite a few things in the community on boards. Specifically, if you know about Impact Austin and the incredible women that are a part of that, she's been pretty involved for a long time. So excited to have Connee Sullivan and personal mentor with us tonight.
Well, thank you, Chelsea, and I'm excited to celebrate International Women's Day with all of you. I've had a career in corporate finance and private equity and currently serve as head of family office services for a multifamily office. I'm not sure exactly when I crossed over from being a young person to an older person, but one of my passions has always been education and child welfare. I think that, something that keeps you young is to stay in touch with young people. It's fulfilling, it's exciting, it's educational, and it just lights me up. So those are things that I've always stayed involved in and been excited about. As Chelsea mentioned, Impact Austin is a women's collective grant-making organization, and that organization has given me an opportunity to be exposed to nonprofits all over the greater Austin area and women of all ages and from all communities in this area. And I love that.
Thank you so much, Connee. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. Sarah is newer to the NOVA Impact community, and one of the things that I think is really exciting about that is we have seen her show up time and time again for our other team member, Sarah, and I think Sarah's a great example of what it means to show up for the women in your life, and the incredible opportunity that you have to share your passions. Sarah's really well versed in water, which I think some of us in Texas have realized the value of this last couple of weeks. So with that, great to have you here, Sarah.
Thanks, Chelsea. It's such an honor to be a part of this panel and such an honor to have that introduction as being somebody who shows up for other women. As you said, my work and my profession is entirely in water. I'm very passionate about it, and I came to it with a realization at the start of my career in disaster response and international development that water was emblematic of everything we do, whether we're looking at socioeconomic trends or gender equality. It really gives you a platform from which you can access a lot of amazing opportunities. I run the Texas Water Foundation, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit here in Texas, where we are invested in the next generation of water leaders. And the reason we are is because I believe that, one, everything we love about Texas is rooted in water, and two, the path to leading Texas to a sustainable water future starts with investing in people as equipped decision makers. And so all of our programs are entirely oriented towards that.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
So next, I would love to welcome Vera. Vera holds a very special place in our community for both Olivia and I, in that both Olivia and I, come from families that have family foundations, but have really struggled and been challenged with how do we understand that world, and how do we connect with other families that are doing this work, and understand the importance of succession planning. And we'll talk more about that. But just really appreciate Vera and the space that she's held for both Olivia and I to explore and to better learn how we best support next gens in the family foundation space. So Vera.
Thanks, Chelsea, and thanks so much for including me today. It's great to be with all of you, and I feel like there's so much to be learned from these kinds of conversations across interests and ages. I think I probably am the elder in the room, which is interesting to me because I hang out with a lot of people that are younger. I'm a mother of 4 children, and I am the president of our family charitable foundation, which is the Shield Ayres Foundation, founded by my grandfather. So I'm the 3rd generation, with the 4th generation coming up and the 5th on its way into the world. So my passion is trying to pass on the values and joy of giving to the next generation, and equipping them as best I can, and so inspired by the work of Chelsea and Olivia, just to make the work that we've done as a family foundation relevant to them, and to be responsive to their interests and make adaptations as necessary to ensure their desire to be engaged in the future. And my other passion is conservation. As a woman in conservation, I have feel women hold a really valuable space in conservation. So that's my other passion.
Thank you, Vera. Our last speaker that joins us, I'm so excited to have with us. She's also a mentor of mine and pretty much taught me everything I know related to crazy giving days and going into businesses and companies and talking about philanthropy, and doing it with grace in some of the most, honestly, as stressful as philanthropy gets anyway, days within our community. So with that, I'm so excited to have Catherine with us, and can't iterate enough how much that she invested and believed in me, and how much that has inspired me to believe in other women as we pursue our careers. Catherine?
Thank you, Chelsea, and thank you for believing in me and inviting me to be a part of this amazing International Women's Day panel. I come from Chicago, from a big Italian family, was really inspired by my grandfather who immigrated here and helped start our family business. And I started out my career in social impact in the art world, and then moved on to community organizing with Chelsea, doing marketing and communications and directing programs. And I discovered I needed a lot more financial knowledge and business acumen to really scale the impact I wanted to see in the world. And so currently I'm in my 2nd year of my MBA at University of Texas, Austin, and I'm focused on ESG, and I'm actually doing a lot of impact investing myself and building a portfolio. So I'm so excited to meet all of you and hopefully share any bit of knowledge I can with the audience and really celebrate International Women's Day.
Thank you, Catherine. We intentionally pulled together a great group of women from different generations, but that also come from different sectors. And one of the things that we're really passionate about within the NOVA community is I brought, community organizing in the philanthropy space, and Olivia was really passionate about venture and investment. I mean, we've learned that sometimes you are more powerful together. So how do we come together and appreciate the culture and the sectors in this space? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Olivia, who's going to dive into our next question.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. That was so helpful. When we go into our questions about, what this topic is, One of the things that we at Nova are really passionate about and excited about is kind of the role of creating agency within leaders within the impact space. We know that every single person on this call and a lot of the people probably watching this are incredible leaders within impact. And we're wondering what the role of creating leadership amongst others can be in maximizing impact. So if we think about our role as leaders, but then also creators of other leaders, I would love to hear everybody's thoughts on what that looks like. And I'll call on Sarah first.
Thanks, Olivia. I have been thinking a great deal about that question, specifically just within the water sector, knowing the pressure and the importance now of equipped water leaders in a variety of sectors, particularly at the heels of maybe one of the biggest water insecurity crises of the nation. The elements that have come to me as being the most important are thinking very strategically about how you identify networks, social systems, gatekeeper theories, how you give people the momentum and the exposure that they need to be invited into positions of leadership, and how you tap into strategic plans on succession planning. So as we've built out our own leadership program, I'm thinking very much, and Sophia, I have to say that I really resonate with the interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary importance of leadership development, is to think about leadership skills not just as the business acumen, but also thinking about effective communication and conflict resolution and mentorship, and how to set people up and curate an experience where they're invited into positions and facilitate that succession planning. And frankly, to make the case of the ROI on why leaders, current leaders, should invest in their staff and invest in succession planning as well. And then to add as kind of a last note on that is thinking very specifically about the importance of diversifying the incoming leadership, right? How it is that that's going to impact our decisions, especially in the water space, in making resilient, well thought out, equipped decisions. So those are my opening thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your example sheds light on how this framework of leadership building and of agency creating can be applied to so many different sectors and issue areas. So thank you, Sarah, for sharing. Connee, would you like to dive into this topic a little more?
There's so many layers to this topic, and I love that Sarah really set the framework out for all of the things that we all deal with. It's absolutely critical to develop the next level of leadership. Otherwise, all of your hopes and dreams and work is just dies with you. So it's imperative. I think that I like to think of things in terms of communication, which is absolutely key. Communication, credibility, and compassion, because there are so many issues that we deal with based on where we're coming from. And if we can open our hearts and minds with compassion to the viewpoints of others, and really through that, not only establish our own credibility, but appreciate the credibility in others, we can really foster that connection so much better.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Fayruz, I know that you have some thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I echo what was said. And, I thought immediately to the word empathy. And the reason I did was, I think so often in whatever business sector, be it in the for-profit, nonprofit, policy making, you're driven so much to just get whatever it is done. And sometimes that ends up railroading people and sort of not seeing the whole person. And I'll never forget having mentors and people in my life when I was younger who actually looked at me as the whole person and said, how are you? What's going on? And I bring that up because you can have some incredible talent who doesn't perform at the level that you maybe are expecting or wanting. There's things that are in their life going on that are not being paid attention to. And so how do we help bring up the next generation of leaders? We have to look at them as a whole person. We have to be understanding. We have to be compassionate, as Connee said. And I think those are, from the communication side to the empathy and the compassion side, those are also really critical elements.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm hearing as a common theme throughout these speakers is kind of not only the need to be there for each other and to lift everybody up, but also to build off of the knowledge that each generation is able to build so that we're not starting from scratch each time. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so important and imperative to have these multi-generational and um, these conversations with people just from diverse backgrounds and diverse ages and diverse everything, because I think it's pretty apparent that that's when efficiencies come about.
I would love to hear from Catherine, if you'd be willing to share in terms of, how you grapple with engagement and how you advocate for ESGs within your family. Has that been successful? Has that been hard? I can't remember how many siblings you have, but I know you have at least one. So just kind of, what's your experience been?
That's a great question, Chelsea, because it's twofold. First, Connee, you're speaking my language. I am so grateful for your sharing compassion, especially right now in times of crises. Being, heart forward and leadership, I think, is so amazing. But yeah, in business school especially, you have those traditional finance teachers that don't think, ESG has a place in finance or thinking about risk at all. So that's definitely a challenge. Just one of my goals in the classroom always is to bring it up, because make sure that it's part of the conversation, because students want to know, and of course employers really care about sustainability. And then in my family, I try to take an investor's approach as much as I can, as I'm a newer impact investor, but try to think from a value perspective and how our sustainability measures, diversity measures, adding value to your family, to your investments, because that's an argument that no one can kind of argue with. When you are avoiding risk or using it in a natural, typical finance way, people kind of, don't really think about the warm and fuzzy part of ESG. They think about, this is actually cutting edge technology. This is going to add value to my investment portfolio. It's going to, diversify my portfolio, all of those things. So I think when you can speak the language, it definitely goes a long way. And then asking questions, listening, kind of all of those basic things. But, it's definitely a challenge out there for sure.
Yeah, I think I can remember one of the things that Catherine mentioned in one of our impact education courses was she said that when she talked to her family members, she focused on not calling it impact investing at all, but really just talking about how it was, helpful in terms of avoiding risk and things like that. And I thought that was really insightful. And obviously each family feels differently, but it definitely resonated with some of our community members. I'd love to hear from Vera, because I know they have some next gens involved. How do you, plan for succession planning, and how do you do that thoughtfully and engage them, but not give them, too much ownership where they fail too hard, too fast, and then don't want to engage further?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really tricky. And I think part of what really excited me about what you all are doing is just learning more how to make space for the next generation in a way that is meaningful. And I think one of the greatest things we've done early on, one of the things that I feel most grateful for is enlisting a wonderful facilitator and doing some visioning retreats while our next generation were in their young, like early 20s. There's 6 in that generation, and we did it with the 3 living generations. So we did a lot of where we're all living in the same area of the country at the time, and assumed we knew each other. We really did a lot of work to try to come into that space without assumptions. And we had an excellent facilitator that helped us really listen and develop some operational agreements and just some shared values. And I think that one thing that I've loved about the work we do as a family when we're working in this nonprofit giving space is that it has really deepened our need to listen to one another and to be present to each other's differences. And I can't say that enough. I think that is one of the hidden gifts of doing this kind of planning, is that really deepens relationships within the family. It's not easy, and there's so many habits of communication that need to kind of be stirred up and exposed, and yet I think it's really an enriching process, not just hopefully towards the organizations that we're giving, but within the family itself. I think it's really helped us be more compassionate with one another, and hopefully not make as many assumptions.
Thank you so much, Vera. One of the things that I really valued from Vera's sharing, but also in conversations with her, is how inclusive they are in regards to giving. I think we were chatting and I learned, she was sharing that, yeah, we give to art and sometimes we focus on land, and some of our folks are on the ranch and they're running schools. And so I think, having that spirit of compassion and really supporting each other in the process of giving and wanting to do good in the world is something that we often lose sight of, or we're so focused on the particulars of our reporting that we forget to understand that philanthropy can really be fun. So with that, I'd love to finish up this particular round of questions with Sophia. Sophia, is running this huge organization that does so much for youth, and is really grounded in those UN SDGs. And so I would love to hear from Sophia your opinion on how we better integrate the SDGs in education with these next rising leaders and what you found to be successful.
It's a great question. Thank you. It's something that we're trying to integrate into everything that we do at SDSN Youth. I think, in my opinion, I think it's two things. So one is around exposure, so like understanding the knowledge. And then the second one is also opportunity to take action. So actually this kind of relates to some of the conversations we're having around like, how do you give women the opportunity to step up into leadership, right? If you give them exposure to people who have done it before, so that could be like a role model or a mentor, so someone who can tell you, I believe in you, I believe that you can get there, but then also giving them the opportunity to actually get there, right? And I think the same thing applies for a lot of topics and concepts that aren't, I guess mainstream would be the right word to use. So some context, the SDGs, they're these goals that were created by the UN to basically create a better world. The goals range from things like reducing poverty, providing clean water, access to clean sanitation, climate action, things like these very important topics that I think a lot of people have been talking about more and more, this topic around sustainability. But what's kind of missing is the action to like work towards it. So I think in terms of how do you bring the SDGs to the forefront of education, whether it be formal education or just maybe informally with like, say, in companies or like maybe media, it is how do we break down these topics into something that's more relatable? So rather than being these like very abstract concepts, so like these random goals, like these 17 goals, you're not going to remember these 17 goals. How can you just think of it as, how do we create a better world? How do we, help the younger generation live in a world that is sustainable, that, has resources that can last them a long time without compromising the quality of life? I think relating it back to like something that is understandable and easy to understand, that being quality of life, being able to be happy, and caring for others. I think empathy is also really important. So yeah, exposure, opportunity, I would say is my answer to that.
Thank you so much, Sophia. I think something that we've learned from Sophia and the entire team is Olivia and I have really challenged ourselves and our community members to look at SDGs within philanthropy and giving, but also SDGs within venture and investment. How do we make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to the UN goals? And how do we teach others to look at those goals when they're evaluating where to give and where to invest? So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Olivia, who's going to give us our last question for this evening. So Olivia?
Yeah. I mean, I think the next question goes really well with what we were just talking about. And Sophia, I want to touch on one thing that you spoke about. It seems like through this conversation, we're kind of talking about, one, creating these spaces where, underrepresented people and women and next gens can thrive and learn and grow and actually perform. But then on the other hand, you brought up a really interesting point about having these really abstract goals like the SDGs, and recognizing that our lives are actually very much intertwined with these goals. They're not just something that you learn in school, but rather this is a way of life. It's a way that it's a way that you can integrate various aspects of your life and align it with impact. And so when we think about creating that space for leaders, I think a crucial part of that education or that curriculum or whatever you want to call it is actually providing tangible tools and skills within each of those aspects on how to align that with impact. So with that, I know we have a few minutes left, but I'll ask the final question. And then I'm just wondering, with all of this context, what are some of the ways that we can create those tangible pathways to engagement and to representation for these people, for traditionally underrepresented groups, so that we can better align our own lives with these, goals of making the world hopefully a more sustainable and equitable and better place?
I'll chime in. I think we're at a real moment in time, given everything that's happened in our world. And I say that because I feel as if I have a 15-year-old daughter who's very in tune with social justice and sustainability. And, frankly, like it was said before, I believe by Connee, the younger people in our lives keep us feeling vibrant. And I learned so much just from her. And so in this era that we're in, there is an attention, a concern, more of an awakened listening to than I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I am an other, frankly. I grew up trying to assimilate every which way I could, living in the United States, being told by my parents, don't ever tell people where you're from. You will most likely have discrimination like we did. Don't talk about your faith practice, your background. Don't even, glad you don't have an accent like we do. I realize now in my 40s how much that impacted me. And thank God my daughter doesn't have to live with that she's in an era and a time where things are different. They're not perfect. And so part of this for me, as I think about being a professional woman and somebody with agency that I've gained through my time and my tenure, is how do I make it better for people like Yara, for people like Chelsea, for people like Olivia and Sophia? What can I do to speak up, whereas nobody maybe spoke up as much before for me? And how do I look out for them? Because it's this world, and to do the things that Sophia talked about, that tie to these much bigger goals of sustainability and long term, are far more bigger than any one person. And that's just kind of how I'm viewing this sort of next era of my time on this planet, if you will. So I'm very, very tuned into what can I do day in and day out, whether it's a fellow woman my age, older than me, younger than me. What can we all do to open those doors and realize it's not just about us. We have to collectively join forces. If it's not just about talking the talk, but it's walking it.
I think that's so beautiful. And I hope that if we leave nothing else from this conversation, we think about Fayruz's point, that we challenge ourselves, not just from time to time, but every day, to think about what can we do to invest in each other and to support one another. I think that's so powerful to integrate as a daily practice. I think Olivia is going to take us over to our final speaker and final thoughts.
Our final speaker is Sarah. We would love to hear your thoughts, Sarah, and then we'll close out.
Well, thanks, because I have some thoughts on very practical ways to help our fellow women. One is, you are a gatekeeper. Any opportunity you have to introduce somebody, to recommend somebody be a speaker on an agenda, to offer to co-write a paper, you are giving them the exposure that Sophia just referenced, right? So to think very actively from a systems network perspective about how it is that you can increase the exposure of all of the brilliant voices that exist. And so that's just my little contribution, is think about how you can be a gatekeeper at every given moment.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and to all of the women that showed up today to support International Women's Day, and for being such change makers, not only in my life and in Olivia's life, but in the life of our community. We hope that you learned from Olivia and I that it's never too late or not important to find somebody and connect and do good in the world together. Olivia and I reconnected over COVID and have been excited to build this company together and do some incredible things. So I hope you ask, what can you do? How can you invest in the next generation? How can you invest in other women and yourself? And also know that there's always an opportunity to start something new. And I'll turn it over to Olivia for her final thoughts, and then we'll close this out.
I just want to say thank you so much to all of these women. Like Sarah said, we are all gatekeepers. We all have the ability to lift somebody up and be a part of these conversations, and we all deserve to. So go get them, ladies.
Bye, everyone. Thanks to the Fyli team for letting us have this intergenerational conversation, and happy International Women's Day.